And so remembering that, you say, well, okay, in terms of Donald Trump has not been linked with any evidence to the pedophilia. And you have to make that clear. And you say, but what's the significance? And the significance, and now I'm referring not to the case files, the Justice Department case files, because we haven't seen them. I'm referring to the emails that had been released by the Epstein estate to the House Oversight Committee. The emails placed Trump in Epstein's apartment.
Yep.
And in his house.
Something that he denied, by the way. He denied that. Before, although now he's not saying anything, but before that, he denied that he was anywhere near that place, apparently.
Yeah. You're being polite. He lied.
You are listening to CEOR Intro.
My guest is Professor Scott Lucas, a highly experienced and globally renowned expert in American politics, US and British foreign policy, and a wide range of international affairs, with specific focus on the Middle East, Iran, Europe, and Asia. He also has expertise in the new media, intelligence services, and propaganda. Scott is a frequent and leading political analyst on major international media outlets, including Times Radio, BBC, CNN, Sky News, Al Jazeera English, France 24, and many others. He has also been an active journalist since 1979 and is the founder and editor-in-chief of EA WorldView, a prominent news site that provides daily news and analysis of global affairs. Okay guys, I need a very big favor from you. If you are watching on YouTube, please make sure you hit the subscribe button, because that makes a massive difference for our podcast. It literally costs you nothing other than a split-second click. But if you're also watching or listening on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, make sure that you give us a follow there. But in order for it to count, you also need to leave us a review. Please feel free to give us whatever review you think that it's fair, but it's important that you do, because otherwise they don't count your following. Why? I have no idea, but that's just how it is. But it costs you 3 seconds to do that. So I'll really, really appreciate it if you do that. And now, without further ado, let's get back to the episode. Scott, welcome back. At such short notice.
Thanks for letting me come back. I thought I might have ruined it last time, but you let me creep back in, so I appreciate that.
I know, actually, now, last conversation, it seemed to have resonated with people. It's like the comments, the sort of comments that I was getting, DMs, etc., is the fact they like the idea that we're trying to walk away from this whole right-left thing, because, you know, it's I don't think it's relevant at all. And in this part of the misinformation series, really, it's what I really wanted to talk about.
Sure.
But since our last conversation, I mean, the last time we talked about Mamdani's election, at the time we didn't know whether he would win. All the data showed that he was definitely about to win. Now we know he has won, and that kind of created a split within the Democratic Party. But then straight after that, we had that crazy news that the senior Democrats, the Schumers of this world, decided to vote with the Republicans to end the shutdown. And that completely blew things apart at the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
And then after that, the Epstein emails thing. And now, as we are recording now, Trump decided to pretend that somehow he planned this all along, and he's now trying to say, well, actually, yeah, I wanted the Epstein files to come out. Why don't these bloody Republicans publish it, etc.? And now that seems to be has created a split within the Republican and the MAGA party.
Yeah. Okay. So how do we navigate all this?
So where do we go, man?
Well, I think at a pragmatic level, and I think you and I are discussing where we go forward in terms of a pragmatic politics, right? Especially for those folks who might feel a bit detached from everything, because it's like, gosh, you know, what's going to happen for our lives? Nobody's listening to us, or we just don't, you know, we just don't understand all these headlines, this white noise that you've got. So at a pragmatic level, I hope we do discuss the aftermath of the shutdown and even go into why the shutdown ended, because I think there's pointers in terms of a positive politics going forward. It doesn't all have to be about a split in the Democratic Party. So I'll pin that there. But clearly, you know, as pragmatic as we want to be, we always have to deal with the headlines that are out there, albeit headlines which have some serious consequences. And in this case, Epstein, or rather Trump's relationship with Epstein. So as you and I talk here on a Monday afternoon, the overnight news has been that Donald Trump all of a sudden is like, Republicans, let's release the Epstein files. And these are specifically the case files around the prosecution, especially in 2019 of Epstein in New York when he was convicted on serious charges regarding the pedophilia. And it's like, whoa, I've done some other interviews this morning. The first question I got is, well, why would Trump do that? And I'm like, that's the easiest damn question I've had in weeks. It's like, Trump did this because he was going to lose the vote. He will lose the vote tomorrow in the House, the lower chamber of Congress, lower chamber of Congress, to release the files. And the tipping point, both literally and figuratively, was last week when you got 218 signatures on what's called this discharge motion. The 218th was the Democrat that Mike Johnson, the House Speaker, refused to swear in for more than 50 days.
Yes.
Representative Adelita Grijalva of Arizona. But to get to 218, there were 4 Republicans there. And the one who is in the headlines right now, Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, better known as being a conspiracy theorist until recently. And then Lauren Boebert, Nancy Mace, both diehard Trumpist. And Representative Thomas Massie, who was the most anti-Trump of the 4. Once they joined the Democrats, once you had that tipping point that they were going to have a vote, then the other Republicans who want the Epstein files out could pile on. Then they could vote.
Yeah.
And what Thomas Massie was saying is, I've got more than 100 Republicans who will back this. And the significance of that is that would be far more than the 2/3 majority needed in the House, not only to pass this, but to override any Trump veto. Right? Now, you still would have to get this to pass in the Senate. You still would have to get a Senate to override a Trump veto. But at the very least, Tuesday's vote was going to be a real symbolic defeat for Trump, a headline-grabbing symbolic defeat.
Yeah.
And so he tries to avoid that by trying to go on the offensive and doing 2 things. One is insulting Marjorie Taylor Greene, again, overnight, traitor Greene, and saying, oh, go ahead and vote for the files to be released. And he'll probably follow that up by saying, oh, I'm doing this as a good guy because it's Democrats who are named in the files, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
We all know that's a crock because, if he really believed that, when Pam Bondi, the Attorney General in February, said, I'm reviewing the files, trust me, I'm reviewing them, they would have released them then. But instead, they stonewalled for 9 months and made up every kind of excuse. Apparently they were washing their hair or they had to take the kids to school. There was some reason why they couldn't release those damn files. And then Trump got cornered. So that's the easy part, right?
Yeah.
In terms of the consequences and where we are, I mean, there's so many layers here again that you keep your eyes on. I mean, the immediate one is in terms of remembering that the focus of this should be the hundreds of girls who were sexually abused, who were raped, who were trafficked, right? And if for those people who are out there, some of the survivors, the girls who survived and who are now women, have put out a video now publicizing why this is so important.
Yes. Speaking
Passionately and emotionally about what they went through while holding up their photos of them when they, at the time that this pedophilia occurred, when they were young.
I suffered so much pain.
So much pain.
So much pain.
I suffered so much pain. I was 14 years old.
I was 16 years old.
I was 16.
17.
14 years old.
This is me.
This was me.
This is me.
When I met Jeffrey Epstein.
This is me when I met Jeffrey Epstein.
There are about 1,000 of us.
It's time to bring the secrets out of the shadows. It's time to shine a light into the darkness.
And so remembering that, you say, well, okay, in terms of Donald Trump has not been linked with any evidence to the pedophilia. And you have to make that clear. And you say, but what's the significance? And the significance, and now I'm referring not to the case files, the Justice Department case files, because we haven't seen them. I'm referring to the emails that had been released by the Epstein estate to the House Oversight Committee. The emails placed Trump in Epstein's apartment.
Yep.
And in his house.
Something that he denied, by the way. He denied that. Before, although now he's not saying anything, but before that, he denied that he was anywhere near that place, apparently.
Yeah. You're being polite. He lied. He lied. I don't
Yes.
think he forgot that he was in Jeffrey Epstein's apartment, Jeffrey Epstein's house. And on at least one occasion, he was in the apartment when one of the victims, Virginia Giuffre, was there. And there may have been more occasions as well, but we know that one. We know there's other emails. And again, you're having to go through 20,000 emails to get some of this out. But there are emails where Epstein talks about Trump being with, he knew of the girls. He knew of the girls that were poached from Mar-a-Lago. The implication in that 2019 email, having gone back and looked at the context of it is that Epstein's saying that Trump knew they were being taken from Mar-a-Lago to be trafficked, right?
Yeah.
But beyond that, Epstein refers to Trump with young women, and there is a key difference here, and that difference is the age of consent, but that Trump was with young women in bikinis on Epstein's properties. You know, the level of proximity, if you want to put it that way, in terms of Trump to Epstein, is closer even than we knew from the public record, and certainly closer than what Trump acknowledged. So that's not criminal in terms of the implications at this point, but it certainly raises questions about judgment and accountability that have political consequences for Trump. And we just have to see how far they go on that level. The other level which you get into which is Trumpist politics. And that is the distinction of this affair, why it's distinct from Trump's involvement with Russia. And yes, Trump did cooperate with Russia in 2016. Different from his blackmail of Ukraine. And yes, Trump did blackmail Ukraine in 2019. In terms of Trump's complicity in what the least was negligence over coronavirus in 2020. The difference here is the fact that you're talking about young girls and pedophilia, and also you're talking about the fact that this was an issue in which Trumpists were invested. Not just Democrats, not just independents. There were Trumpist and MAGA, faithful who wanted these files out. And the idea is that Trump has tried to deceive them or lie to them. And that's where the Marjorie Taylor Greene episode becomes sort of iconic.
Yeah.
Because, that's where Marjorie comes from. Marjorie was a QAnon sympathizer at the very least.
Well, still is. I would have thought that she still is. She's the same person. She's not any different.
She's cloaking herself very differently. I'm going to say this as an aside that you can follow up on, but that interview she did with CNN yesterday, where she tried to rebrand herself, that she doesn't deny that she has advocated violence in the past, but she says, I regret that I advocated violence in the past. She still is peddling all types of tropes about certain groups, but she's trying to look like she's trying to normalize herself. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Be that as it may, he goes after Marjorie Taylor Greene on the idea that she is a traitor for having supported the effort to get accountability and transparency over the files. And he is still attacking her over that. And when you do that, you pose Trumpists with a choice. Do you continue to side with him even when you have qualms about what he is doing? Or do you break? And that is all in play. And then the overlay on top of it, I'll just emphasize it. I don't think the Epstein affair is what you might call the breaking point for Trump's authority, because the way that these affairs quite often happen, I mean, in a far more mundane way, it happened with Watergate, is these, there's not like a single moment when it just all comes collapsing, right? Yeah. But your authority gets eroded. It gradually gets eroded, and it gets eroded because of also the underlying issues, the day-to-day issues, and in this case, the economy. And the U.S. economy is running into some serious problems. It's running into some serious issues. And it was really notable yesterday that there were two stories that were on the Sunday morning talk shows, where for those people who still watch TV, that's where it all, that's the shop window in the States. And one of the issues was Epstein. And then the other was the economy, where they trotted out Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, and Larry Hassett, the head of the National Economic Council. And those two are like spinning like pinwheels to try to say nothing to see here. It's all fine. Like, oh, we have inflation. Like, we have inflation almost a year after we take an office, but somehow it's the Biden people that are responsible for the inflation. Mm-hmm. And then when Hassett is presented with a list of 10 grocery items that have increased in price, and that spike is led by the increase in the price of coffee, he goes, "You didn't mention eggs. You didn't mention eggs." And the fact that eggs have dropped in price since the start of the year, and the reason why they dropped in price, by the way, is because we had a bird flu episode at the start of the year that drove it up. So they're like, and Bessent at some point, were they talking about the rise in beef prices? At one point, is talking about migrants bringing cows into the United States. That somehow, because they've stopped migrants bringing cows into the United States, that the beef prices have gone up. I go, really? You're the Treasury Secretary. Have some respect, man. So that's layer upon layer in terms of where, because this story, what happened fundamentally is, and we'll get back to the story that we could talk about, which is a shutdown. If we go back a week ago, it's like top of the news cycle is, oh my God, Democrats are in disarray because the shutdown has ended. Oh, all that election, feel good factor, that's gone. Someone's going to, chop off Chuck Schumer's head, whether or not Chuck is smart enough to realize it, and you just whip all of that up. But within 24 hours, that was gone. I mean, because on the Tuesday, so last Tuesday, I was preparing to do a big deep dive video cast with a great colleague named Maddie Hale. And Maddie is saying, all right, we're going to talk about shutdown and so on. And we were supposed to record at 3:00 UK Ireland time. And we got the news flash just before 2 that that the first emails that named Trump had dropped. And Maddie's like, we ain't going to talk about shutdown now, and it's like, and that was it. In other words, that Epstein now is top of news cycle, and Trump has kept it at top of news cycle with his shift, but it's going to stay there for the next few days. And how's Trump going to either push it out of the news cycle or try to make himself look like the good guy? And I don't think he can do either.
Yeah. And that's all part of this whole misinformation storm that he created and the MAGA movement have created, isn't it? Like, as you said, these multiple layers of excuses and there's nothing to see here, or the migrants bringing all the cows or whatever. And it's like, and I think this is why I always tell people, make sure you read, don't listen to these people. And also I would argue as well. I know a lot of politicians, they try to rebrand themselves, and we see that here in the UK as well. People who try to somehow, who were associated with the lettuce queen, Liz Truss, and they're kind of now walking around news studios pretending that it had nothing to do with them. And I really, I ask people, use your votes, right, to never make them forget. But my concern that voters, they tend to suffer some sort of, short-term or long-term amnesia. They forget. I mean, you see, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's now kind of rebranding herself in preparation for next year. And I'm worried that actually next year people think, including people who watch CNN, they're like, oh, actually, yeah, she's all right. She's all right. Actually, no, she's not all right. She's not all right.
Yeah.
After years and years and years, she was one of the people that made Trump and the MAGA movement what it is. But that is part of the misinformation. That they're all doing it, collectively, individually. It's crazy, Yeah. I mean, this is the thing that I find frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, let's cut through this a bit, and we'll tie it for the moment. Tie it to Epstein. I'll give you a couple of examples. I kind of make a distinction between misinformation. There's three levels here. There's spin, misinformation, and disinformation. The spin's just a 21st century name for when I first started lecturing in 1989. The very first course I designed with a brilliant academic, my doctor father, named Professor J.S. Grenville, was on propaganda. Right. And that's what we used to call spin, propaganda. And it's just that it was like the Nazis that did it and the fascists and, Stalin did it. We didn't have propaganda in the United States. And of course, we got spin everywhere. And we talked a little bit about the spin. Misinformation. I kind of let people off the hook on misinformation because misinformation for me are claims that are made where the people think they are true. People think they're true and they're actually wrong, right? And in this case, I think it's important to do that because I think with Trump in particular, but others we could name, there's disinformation. And disinformation is people know it's not true. I mean, Trump ain't the sharpest tool in the box when it comes to having a grasp of any information, but he knows because he's on record saying it. He knows he lost the 2020 election.
It's straight up lies, basically. Yeah,
it's straight up lies. Yeah, straight up lies. It's straight up disinformation. Now, so where we are with was a combination of disinformation and spin that took place over the weekend, just before I think it didn't work. So Trump makes the shift overnight, but the play they made was that Trump ordered his attorney general and his faithful servant Pam Bondi to prosecute, some might say persecute, if they were being, cheeky like me, to persecute Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, the former Treasury Secretary, and Reid Hoffman, who is the co-founder of LinkedIn and is a Democratic donor. And the quote investigation was going to be on, where are they in the Epstein files? Or, where have they been named in the Epstein files? And this was despite the fact that in July, as part of their attempt to stonewall, Pam Bondi had said, we have reviewed all the files and there's nothing here to charge anybody, right? So clearly this is a stunt to both make the Democrats the bad guys, or, Clinton, Hoffman, and Summers. So you tar the Democrats through them, and then also possibly to tie up the files because Bondi can say, oh, this is an active investigation, so we can't release any files related to Epstein because they're part of that. Yeah. That I think is the sign that fizzled out is what Trump has done overnight, that play hasn't worked. But it is an example that, if the Epstein file goes on, that you really have to find reliable people who are starting from the evidence itself. They're not making some sweeping conclusion. They're starting from the evidence itself. So what can we learn from that? And indeed, when the first three emails, which the House Democrats released, so this was the Democrats released 3, and then the Republicans tried to flood the zone and shift attention by putting 20,000 out there. The first 3 is you could go through each of those emails the way that we sort of summarized a few minutes ago, in that the 2011 email from Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell, which talks about the dog that didn't bark, is Trump. Now, you have to say, we don't definitively know what he means, the dog that didn't bark.
It didn't bark, yeah.
Is it the case that Trump hasn't come out to defend Epstein, that he didn't bark that, or is the dog that didn't bark is the fact that Trump actually should be under suspicion? There's a cryptic reference at the end where he refers to police chief, etc. I'm 75% there, and you have to be honest here. All I can do is I could speculate. I think the speculation here is that, Jeffrey was 75% to trying to drop Trump in it by pointing to him and saying, look, he's culpable. Because the second of the 3 emails that were released from 2015 is, without going too deep here, is Epstein and Michael Wolff, later Trump's biographer. But it just so happened they're actually mates. Talk about Trump possibly being asked at a Republican presidential debate about Epstein. And if Trump does not acknowledge that he was on Epstein's plane, does not acknowledge he was in Epstein's residences, then Wolff and Epstein could either publicly bring that out and make him look bad, or they could privately go to him and use that as leverage against him. So that's there. But why am I telling you this? The 2011 email that you drill down is that it is there that Epstein tells Ghislaine Maxwell, Trump in my apartment, victim was also there. Right.
Yeah.
And that's the evidence. Unless you think Epstein's lying in that particular email, that's the evidence that you start from. And you almost, and that's the challenge, is that the problem here is it takes time. It takes time to go through all those pieces of evidence. And so understandably, people want to go to someone who will give them the quick distillation of it.
Yep.
But there are going to be bad actors out there who are going to deliberately, spread disinformation about the information. About the information. And it almost becomes a case of that you have to go back to what we used to do in the olden days, as I tell my kids, and they laugh at me about it, in the olden days, which is, you would have a community of friends, of associates that you would talk to. You'd say, well, what do we know about this? What did we know about this? Right. And because you didn't have the internet at that point, you would have to do it at your workplace, or you'd have to do it at, if you were at uni, you'd have to do it at uni, or you do it sitting over a beer. And you kind of need to get back to that. You kind of need to get off of social media at times and just talk to people who you trust or who you think have a wise head on their shoulders.
Yeah.
And until you do that, you sort of don't make judgments. Just don't make judgments.
That would be impossible, I think, especially with social media. I mean, firstly, people have ridiculously short attention span. And, before our recording, I mean, there's some loads of weird stuff went on social media, like even made the news. For example, apparently that Donald Trump, or rather, Epstein may have evidence that Donald Trump basically gave Clinton a blowjob because I'm like, come on, man. But it's but people talking about it, and these things just spread like fire.
They talk about it, but to tell you, I mean, and again, Tim, it's the time of thing, and you don't know people have time, but I went to that, and it's like, so it's Epstein's brother, it's Michael telling Jeffrey, what if Putin has, basically got a copy of, Trump blowing Bubba, and it's like, well, who's Bubba and why is Trump blowing him? Yeah. And of course, Bubba was Clinton's nickname when he was quite young. And so it got to the point where Michael Epstein's come out and said, no, it's not Clinton, right? So it's just a joke we were telling each other. And it was clearly a very crude joke in the fact that whether Putin whether he had compromising information on Trump, right? Which is the real significance about it. If you want to talk about it, it goes back to the Trump-Russia affair. But, that's what I'm saying is that hopefully people might get galvanized by it, but you just kind of hope for people's like, folks, take a reality check on this. You can let your jaw drop, then bring it back in place and say, okay, I'm not going to take this as gospel until I get some type of confirmation of it, some verification of it. And it was easy enough if you actually, take the time to check out reliable sources to realize, that there's absolutely no substance, that Bill and Trump were out there, up to their own, side affair, as it were.
Yeah.
As much as some people might want to believe that.
Well, that kind of goes back to, my first guest that was in the Misinformation Watch, and she actually came twice, Emma Monk from Monk Debunks. Yeah. She said that basically the key indicator, whatever it is that you're reading a story, even on the main, like on newspapers, not just social media, it's if it really kind of blows up your emotions, if you feel so shocked or angered or whatever. And she said that there's a huge possibility it's misinformation, because that's the point. It's about really poking you in that way to, get your emotional or make you emotional. So that then you start sharing this misinformation. That's how it all starts. Yeah. And I agree. However, the whole Epstein thing, it is shocking. Like, if reading some of the things in the emails and what's been reported, it is pretty shocking. And my concern, I just wanted to ask your opinion on that, because the Trump administration, obviously Pam Bondi, she had plenty of time, and Kash Patel, of course, who runs the FBI, he had plenty of time for them to go through the files, potentially, redact parts of these files, or even, I mean, I don't know, is there a possibility that they could have doctored any of the information in there? Because my concern that, because Trump, okay, he is a bit desperate now. He's trying to kind of change, kind of make it look like it's all about the Democrats, etc. But is there danger that they've actually may have tampered rather with these papers in a way so that all the Republicans and Trump are kind of hidden somehow, and it's just all the Democrats? Is there danger of that, do you think?
There's some social media wag out there who said, look, this is where the find and replace button becomes useful. And you just simply type in find Donald Trump, replace with Bill Clinton, 250 instances found to click. Look, if they try to mess around with these, because remember again, these aren't just simply emails. These are actually files in a criminal investigation. Right? Now that jacks this up a level. That means it might be emails, it might be witness statements, it might be further testimony that's been taken, it might be forensic evidence that's been taken. You mess around with that, you are committing a felony, right?
Yeah, but
now,
you
might say that. Yeah, I was going to say, you guys say, well, you might say, given there's a convicted felon in the White House, you might care. But there's a pretty high bar there. And the other thing is, again, the level of these files should be in the Justice Department. There should be redundancy checks, right? In terms of when these files were logged, when they were accessed, et cetera, that if anybody's messing with them, you should be able to track that down. I'm not going to put anything past Trump and his merry band. But I would say at this point, I wouldn't jump there all the way there. I think it's going to be important again when, if and when the documents come out, the case files come out, that we start from the premise of, at least until we have any evidence or doctor, what's in them, what is in them, what can we, because the thing about doctoring, and I say this as someone who's worked with, government documents of corporations and others going back for way too long now, because it makes me feel old, is that when you get any document which is altered or might have been, it's just what Emma Monk was telling you in a different way, it red flags, right? It red flags in terms of it doesn't fit with other documents you've seen. It looks to be a bit outlandish on the face of it. And it's like, okay, let's take a step back with this. This used to be the problem at both the Kennedy and the Johnson libraries, the presidential libraries, because of the JFK assassination. The people would try to smuggle. People would try to smuggle in stuff to claim that they were documents. But you could suss that, and they were able to suss that when people tried to do it. So I'm not. There's a long road to go in terms of actually seeing these documents first. Let's stick with that, and then when and in the meantime, let's look at the emails that have already come out, and let's listen to the victims. And this is something that's, the victims are out there. The victims are actually saying this is what happened. Now, there are legal reasons why they may not be able to name people yet.
Yes.
Right. Yes. And make the accusation yet. But listen to what they're saying. And do remember this fundamental, I think, is the other thing, just all those folks out there. While it's important to find out Trump's place in this for me, it's just also remember that there are other men, powerful men, men who were part of the elite, who have been protected, who have been shielded from any accountability or responsibility, criminal, civic, political, moral, for going on more than 20 years. And they've been protected, possibly by Donald Trump himself, but certainly by others as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it is important that that protection is taken away from those individuals if they are culpable. So that is an additional reason to say, look, we can speculate a lot on the files and so on, but keep the fundamental on when are we going to get transparency and accountability to do justice, a belated justice by those victims.
And that's actually the point I was coming to as well after this is that, like, I am concerned that the media, again, they're completely, obviously, their minds are melting now about this because it's all about Trump. But there's hardly, they hardly mention the fact that, as you said, there are loads of other men involved there, very, very powerful men. So it's not, yes, for the political football, unfortunately, it's all about Trump. But the reality is, if we're talking about justice, it's not just him. I mean, there are many other people, including potentially people in tech. Some of the tech billionaires are in there as well. We already know that, Bill Gates had a relationship with him, although that of course he denied doing anything wrong. But the fact that he still continued having a relationship with him after he was convicted, I mean, that was already a disgraceful decision, to say the least. And I think this is my concern, like, again, because it will become this yet another political or politicized football game that the victims will be forgotten, the other culprits will be forgotten, and really, ultimately, all of that is for what? Justice, not political game. And I think that, and already, I don't know, you've probably seen this already, that some of the MAGA political commentators, like Megyn Kelly, for instance, that they kind of try to excuse it now. There's like, what if a 15-year-old, I can't remember who said something stupid that's like, a 15-year-old.
Megyn Kelly says that a 15-year-old is different from a 5-year-old.
From a 5-year-old,
right?
Like, really?
Oh, really? So she's lowering the bar to say that if someone coerced a 15-year-old into having sex, that there's nothing wrong with that. Now, first of all, because I'm sure Megan watches this podcast, so let's just make this clear when she does, that if the age of consent is 16, even voluntary sexual relations with a 15-year-old is statutory rape. Bottom line, no messing about with that. Even if your age of consent was 14, any coerced sexual relationship with a 15-year-old is criminal conduct, right? Bottom line. And I want to drive this home because Megyn Kelly, and Donald Trump insulted Megyn Kelly with one of the foulest insults I've ever heard aimed at a woman because he did not like the way that she conducted the Republican primary debate in 2015. I'm not even going to repeat what he said. It was misogynist and it was nasty. And despite that, Megyn Kelly, a decade later, comes out here and is willing to run cover for Donald Trump, which just shows you when we ask, how did we get to this point? The number of people who are complicit in this because of whatever gain they think they can get out of this, and that you're absolutely right that the girls in this case become expendable for those people. And sorry, I'm starting to preach now, but that is the scale of what we're doing. So, should we talk shutdown?
Yes, well, that's the thing, because sort of before all of that, because obviously the shutdown, again, that's another quagmire, but effectively they use the shutdown as an excuse as well to withhold, the release of these files, which is again another reason why the Democrats. It was just I heard Chuck Schumer and people around him decided, actually, you know what, we need to vote because we need to end the shutdown. I'm thinking, even from I'm a political Luddite. I always say that. I'm a political Luddite. But even for a political Luddite like me, I'm like, this is the dumbest thing. What are you talking about? This is so stupid. How could you have done that? So let's go there. So for those who might not be aware, how did the shutdown start? Why did it? Well, why did it all start in the first place? And of course, how did that impact people's lives? I mean, millions of people literally have no food as a result of it. The Republicans basically didn't care, and they did say that. Trump specifically said that. And the Democrats, of course, they're blaming the Democrats as they would, but the Democrats did have a reason to basically vote against the opening of the government. And then, of course, Trump being Trump, he managed, as I said earlier, hook this up to, with the Epstein files. It's like crazy stuff. So let's start with that, like the short history of it.
Just break it down. It is. And I'm going to say the goal of doing this is not to take sides. For me, the goal is to try to explain this, because I think it's going to be important to explain this, because I think it's going to be important that the end of the shutdown not overtake the broader mission here, which is to deal with the damage of the Trump administration. And I will explain that again by effectively not playing angels and devils, especially not with the Democrats. The start of this is that the Trump administration, what's happened now is that you don't have an organized government budget process. It used to be that you would have a budget every year and that Congress would vote on the budget, et cetera. Now, what you have is you have certain set piece moments, like the Trump administration's big, not so beautiful bill in the summer, which was the giant tax cut giveaway that added $4 trillion, or will add $4 trillion to the government deficit over 10 years. You have something like that, and then it's like, oh shit, we've got to extend our line of credit effectively. What's called a continuing resolution. And so the funding expires at the end of September, and they've got to get a continuing resolution. Now, back in March, when the Democrats first considered saying, no, you're not going to get another line on credit because you're threatening government, you're gutting agencies or eliminating them entirely, you're threatening social security programs, you're threatening welfare programs, they did not force the issue with the Republicans, and the government stayed open. And there was a lot of animosity towards the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer at that point. Well, here we get to September. It's like, okay, are you going to now make the Trump administration accountable? And what the Democrats effectively said is, look, you're not going to get an extension on your line of credit unless you deal with the fact that the tax credits for the healthcare, including the Affordable Care Act, those tax credits are going to expire. And when those tax credits expire, premiums are going to more than double, including for people that can't afford to pay that. So, unless you deal with that issue, we're not going to give you this blank check. We're
literally talking about tens of thousands, like it went up by tens of thousands for some people, apparently.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. And quite clearly, it was forcing people into the choice. And we now are facing this because there was no agreement to extend those tax subsidies. By the end of the year, those premiums will have spiked. The Republicans refused to discuss. They say now they're trying to rewrite history. They said, oh, if you keep the government open, we're willing to discuss it. Yeah, I know they didn't, because I was tracking the statements at that time. And indeed, I've been tracking the statements of Donald Trump all along. It needs to be foregrounded. Even now, Donald Trump is saying he wants to gut Obamacare. He wants to gut the Affordable Care Act. And his people are saying, we're going to replace the Affordable Care Act with the fact that we'll give you a bit of money and you can go back and find your private insurance, which, ding, 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 was the system that we brought in the Affordable Care Act to deal with, because private insurance was so damn expensive when you got to 2010 that you had, 40 million Americans at least that were uninsured. So, they effectively now the Republicans are saying we can just go back to that. When the Democrats decided we're not going to give you the extension of funding, then government closes. So let's forward wind it 43 days. And we get up to last week, and we get eight Democrats who join the 50. They joined 52 Republicans. Interestingly enough, one Republican did not support ending the shutdown, and that's the Libertarian Rand Paul of Kentucky. Yeah. Which has to deal with growing hemp in Kentucky. believe it or not, Rand Paul, the libertarian, and unfortunately, this was not hemp that you could then eventually smoke for recreational purposes, but for other reasons. I digress. When the Democrats join the 52 Republicans, it gives the 60 votes to effectively close the debate off, right? And off you go, Mr. Bill. At that point, there is a lot of anger at those 8 Democrats because they did not get a commitment to extend the tax credits on healthcare. All they got was a pledge, whatever that's worth, from the Senate Majority Leader, John Thune, that there'll be a vote in the Senate by mid-December, right? But of course, there's no guarantee that even if you have that vote, that it's going to extend the tax credits. And as I've just mentioned, the Republican play here is probably to have an alternative, which is give people a bit of money and give them private and have them go back to the private market, the unrestricted private market. So what did the Democrats get out of this? Okay, I fully sympathize with that. But from the standpoint of some of those Democrats, and I followed their arguments all along, and I'm not talking really here about John Fetterman of Pennsylvania. I think Fetterman's a very unusual character. I'm going to be polite here right now. Fetterman effectively is a Republican right now, who just happened to have been elected as a Democrat. But, I'm thinking about, for example, Senator Shaheen. And I'm thinking about Tim Kaine out of Virginia, who were among the 8. The Trump folks went scorched earth during this shutdown. And when they furloughed 700,000 workers without pay, they said, we may fire them. We may just fire them. Now, you might say the courts are going to tell you can't do that. That's not legal. That doesn't stop them. They'll still try to fire, right? And Russ Vought, the director of Office of Management and Budget, perhaps the person who is one of the biggest destroyers of the government, but is not well known, he was letting that be known. We'll just fire these folks. And when we fire these folks, it means that at the agencies they work for, we'll no longer have the staff to be effective. We don't care. We've got them. They were willing to stop SNAP, Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, food assistance, and not hand out any of it until the shutdown ended. Indeed, when, again, because of court orders, the states were allowed to give some of the funds out. They were allowed to give some food support to people. When the Supreme Court held that up, the Trump administration went in and demanded the money back from the states. Right?
Yeah.
They were talking about other programs like women and children programs that were going to be closed for lack of funding. And of course, you had the transportation issue was getting headlines because they were starting to foul up the airports because the air traffic controllers who were furloughed, who had to work without pay, a lot of them weren't showing up. So they started cutting flights. And of course, we're starting to get to the prospect as someone who is due to fly to the United States for Thanksgiving. I'm like, oh, Jesus, are we going to be able to travel?
They've canceled their plans already. I know people that they said we're not going to fly because it's way too risky. So it's horrendous.
And so that's what the Trump folks were doing. The Trump folks were basically holding not just a sword of Damocles over the heads of the American people. They were waving it, right? And they didn't care who was getting hit by it. And, when you talk about Tim Kaine of Virginia, who's got 150,000 federal workers, in that state, and you're talking about those who are furloughed without pay, that's it, they may be fired. Those who have worked without pay don't know when they're going to get paid, don't know if they're going to make end meet. So you can hear what I'm saying. There is, get inside their heads as to why they went there. Now, there may have been, and I suspect there was, a bit of maneuvering, so there would be 8 and only 8 Democrats that would join the Republicans. You get up to the magic 60 number, and then it goes. So it doesn't look like all the Democrats have gone there. But the problem here is, first of all, there will be a lot of people, quite rightly, in the Senate and in the House, and indeed people at large who will say, no, there's a bigger issue here. If you give way to them without any guarantees on health care, they're going to run over you again. And I fully understand that. what I would say is where we are now is, I'll leave Chuck Schumer to the side. I do think you and I, we could talk about this. There's a passing of the torch amongst the Democrats, and Schumer's one of the old guard, and he needs to hand it over as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He just honestly does. But I'll park that. I think the point I'm making here is, whatever side you are on the argument on that, and again, that beyond left or right argument, wherever you identify, there's a priority here, which is on the basics of the economy, of the healthcare, of transport, of education. There's so much that needs to be done. So you do need to reach an understanding here, because that's because this fight isn't over. Even this specific fight isn't over, because the continuing resolution, the line of credit has been extended till the end of January. Now, if the Republicans do not allow a legitimate vote on healthcare, if they try to put a flim-flam alternative, such as $2,000 to people, and then they can pay really, really high premiums and watch that money just disappear. If that's the thing they do, then you call them to account by saying, you're not going to get an extension on the line of credit at the start of January. End of January.
Right.
Because if this goes back into a shutdown, my reading of it is this: you have given the Republicans their chance. You let them off. You get them on the shutdown. If they come back and they do not work on healthcare, the first thing that happens is healthcare, which was not amongst the top issues in 2024. It was economy. It was immigration. It was not healthcare. It was in elections before that.
Yeah.
I went back and wrote something about it. 2016, 2018 as well, when the Democrats did quite well because Trump was in power. You've got healthcare at the top of the agenda. That's a vote winner for you. That's a vote winner in the 26 elections, right?
Yeah.
And you also have put the marker down on who bears the blame for this shutdown, because they are not willing to negotiate in good faith. And I think you have to keep your eyes on that, both as a matter of political tactics and also, I think, of a matter of decency here. And that is, we got caught between two things. And one is, we got caught between the longer-term objective of protecting healthcare and the short-term objective of, we don't want people to be broken by this shutdown. And the Trump folks are willing to break people. That's always the problem with authoritarian regimes.
Yeah.
They will always hold their populations hostage. And they will always, it is, in fact, it's not just a hostage situation. It's almost like a torture situation. We will torture people if you do not comply with our demands.
Yeah.
So that's a way of, in that long answer, saying, I understand why it played out the way it did. I don't necessarily, part of me understands it. Part of me wishes it hadn't come to that, if you want to put it that way. All of me says, we got to look forward now, because the next 2.5 months are going to be vital, both in the short term and in the long term, if we're going to break this authoritarianism.
But the Republicans not going, because looking even since Obama, I would say, history, when people like Obama, Biden, and Schumer, they would all say, look, we need to work together with the Republicans. We need to sort of reach across the aisle and all of that lovely stuff. And the Republicans always screwed them over. Always. Like there was never, well, certainly, from what in the recent history, I don't remember Republicans ever not screwing over the Democrats. And I think the concern, because I've looked at various reports and polling and et cetera, there's a concern that the Republicans simply not going to, everything that they said kind of makes sense. But do you think the Republicans would care still? Would they say, well, yeah, maybe this time we need to actually, give the Democrats what they want. Otherwise, we're going to look bad, because the polls show that even their own voters are blaming the Republicans for the shutdown, not the Democrats, which is very interesting. So do you think there's a possibility that they might actually cave in to the Democrats then? From what you said, that you seem to suggest that it's a possibility.
I think there's a logical, and I'm going to emphasize that logic doesn't always work in politics. There's a logical path here, which is to reform certain aspects of the Affordable Care Act. And there's two in particular that that I know discussions are being held on across the aisle, because there are a few Republicans that are negotiating with the Democrats on those to take place.
Right.
And the one is the question of the cap, the income cap, under which you are eligible for the tax credits for the Affordable Care Act. And I think that's a legitimate area for discussion. If someone makes $300,000 a year, or $400,000, I don't, where do you set it? Should they be able to claim tax credits here when your first priority is for those who are lower income people to be able to afford health care? So I think that's a legitimate right. There's another which has to do simply that you make sure the system isn't abused, which is the argument that they need to, you effectively have to pay a token premium, right? And I haven't quite worked through the argument on this. You can probably explain it to me as a techie, but that, there's a way that if someone does not have to pay a premium at all, right, that you don't have the level of checks when they are registered onto the system. If they have to pay, then they have to provide financial proof of payment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then it goes through there. And I think that's legitimate to discuss those issues. But again, I emphasize there are Republicans who are discussing that with Democrats, but that is not where Trump and his circle are. They're not talking about those provisions. They're talking about gutting the entire program. And
well, isn't it part of Project 2025, in fact, isn't it? Like, that's the whole point, is that it's to gut all government departments, basically.
Well, and specifically, Trump 1.0 tried to gut Obamacare. John McCain famously saved it. Right. Yeah. So, these guys have got previous. And when you have whack jobs, and they are whack jobs, like Bobby Kennedy Jr. and the TV's Dr. Oz, when those are your medical specialists. And sure enough, TV's Dr. Oz was there this weekend going, well, we give people money. They can just go, they can make their own choice in the insurance markets. And then that's it. And great. Dude, are you seriously giving us that? I mean, I know how difficult it is in Ireland to actually choose between insurance providers and have to cut through all the clauses and look at all the conditions that are covered and so on. And you're telling me that you're simply going to cut people loose to have to deal with this? But I have a lot of things I could talk about with Dr. Oz. One day I'll tell you about how he's up to his eyeballs in that fake hydroxychloroquine scam back during COVID.
Okay.
Another story for another day. Let's get back on point.
I was about to say that wouldn't surprise me, but yeah, carry on. Yeah, another day.
Another day. It presents a choice here. If the Republicans are willing to negotiate, then you get them on the record negotiating, and you talk about where we go forward in terms of a constructive way of dealing with this. Oh, and by the way, that we also talk to those Republicans about the $850 billion that they cut off Medicare and Medicaid with the big not so beautiful bill, and when we're going to see some of that being restored. That should also be in the discussions. If they are not willing to talk on that basis, or most of them are not willing to talk on that basis, then you hold their feet to the fire at the end of January. And you prepare the ground for this. One thing that made this shutdown a little bit more distinctive from back in March is that there was some preparation for this in terms of getting healthcare flagged as being the key issue, right?
Okay.
You have to keep that going forward. Later on for our next chat, I'll double check and look at the vulnerable Senate seats that come up. But I can tell you that, for example, you have a Senate seat coming up in Georgia, which I'm pretty sure is John Ossoff's seat. Now, this is the one, remember in 2020, that the Democrats won both Senate seats because there was the regular election and then the special election. And they won both of them because Trump and his minions looked incompetent over COVID, right? Well, here you are, 6 years later, John Ossoff's back up and you've got a healthcare issue. Who's going to be competent and responsible on that? Well, you hope people will say John Ossoff, who I think is a very good senator, by the way. I think the Senate seat's coming up in Ohio, I think in 26, right? And you'd like to get that Ohio seat in terms of Democrats. But more important, beyond talking about individual seats, you want to get a consensus amongst Americans that stop ripping up our healthcare system. Stop it. Because you have, and let's just be clear here, you got a bunch of grifters in the White House. Those guys don't give a damn about healthcare. And it's not just a question of they're wealthy enough, they have their own insurance prices. They're looking to make profit-making schemes off of this. And part of the profit-making schemes, if you cut Obamacare, that means that you return a lot of people back into an unregulated market with healthcare providers, some of whom are attached to politicians, who also make money off of the profits of those healthcare providers. That's the way the system has worked in the past. And I just happen to mention this because I'll flag this up. Here's a story that would have passed almost anybody by this week. Donald Trump has bought $82 billion, with a B, $82 billion, not 82 billion, sorry, 82 million. He's not even worth that much. $82 million in bonds. Almost got myself in trouble there. $82 million
You got me
in
worried.
bonds.
I was like, really? He's that?
He's worth that much.
Probably, but
Yeah, exactly. 82 million in bonds, right? In companies, which are subject to government regulation and government decisions. They include tech firms. They include AI firms. The president of the United States has purchased $82 million in bonds in companies in which his government is making rulings that affect those companies. I think that's called conflict of interest. I think that is called conflict of interest, boys and girls. You know,
I was about to say, is that even legal? I mean,
it is with bonds. It is with bonds. I went and checked it.
Wow.
Because I'm sorry, it is legal for there is nothing that prohibits a president from taking out bonds in a company, although it raises ethical and conflict of interest questions. But when the hell is that ever?
But these guys don't care about ethics. I mean, oh man,
fuck no.
Wow. I mean, well, we kind of sort of alluded to that in our last episode. I mean, I'm keep on thinking, like, surely, when this presidency ends, the American nation will be like, you know what? We need to start introducing some proper laws in here. I mean, like laws that control the president, no matter what. I mean, they've done it since. Right. I mean, well, what was it? Which president did they introduce some? I mean, after Nixon, didn't they introduce? I don't know which ones, but they introduced new laws after Nixon specifically to prevent future presidents from doing what he's done. And I think surely, but at this stage, a lot of things have to change. Like the Supreme Court, for example, that has to change. Like you can't allow it to be politicized in that way. The president must sell off whatever shares they have. I think even all senators should get rid of all of their shares. I mean, it's like literally like a complete revolution. I mean, legal revolution. I mean, is there any chance of that? Do you think ever?
Well, just the general tenet is darkest before the dawn. I mean, what you really are, is I think you either have a system which is irretrievably broken, right? Which we hope has not happened. Or you have a system which has been damaged, but where people, at times when a system is damaged, people take stock. And they say, look, we've got to come to grips with what has happened. I mean, the most obvious example of that comes to my mind is usually coming after wars, right? And just to remind folks, the combination of depression and wars in the 30s and then up to 45 is why you had such a significant change in systems, which is we aren't going to let people just die in the streets or whatever. We're going to have a decent social welfare system, right? And we're going to regulate businesses so they can't continue just simply to rip countries off. Now, what we've seen is a rollback of welfare systems. We've seen a rollback of public services which have taken place, in part because that consensus around them has broken down, and it's been shocked. I mean, one of the big shocks to that consensus, well, there's two shocks. The one was the great financial crash back in 2008, 2009, when people didn't say, how can we protect ourselves from the great financial crash? They went around and said, government is the problem, right? And that's the Tea Party in the States, for example, or that's, the Reform Party's hijinks over here. And then the second thing that happens is that when you have a shock to the system, when it's damaged, what they did is they turn against migrants and asylum seekers and refugees, right? And that's been the past 15 years, is that the erosion of the consensus around public services and social welfare has been, that has been the trend, which is why Obamacare is distinctive, because it cuts against that trend. That's what's so interesting. Is that in the midst of that trend, which is small government, yada, 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 everything, that you got that healthcare reform through, which was just, whatever else. And I've got mixed feelings about Obama in the Obama years, especially on his foreign policy. But whatever else you say about him, to get Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act through,
that was a big deal.
At that time, that's a hell of an achievement.
Yeah.
Well, now here you are. And the fundamental is that in 26, it's going to be economy. To an extent, it's going to be immigration. It's going to be healthcare. That are going to be key issues here. And what you really are asking is, are people going to vote with their emotions on this? And are people going to rule with their emotions on this? Which is what they did in 2016, which is what they did in 2024. Or are they going to vote with a real sense of, we need someone to take care of this and be responsible?
Yeah.
Which is what they did to an extent in 2018. And it's definitely what they did in 2020. Again, crises lead to moments. What 2020 did is it got the orange guy out of the office and people saying, we don't need this damn tomfoolery. Get us out of the pandemic. The problem here is the steps needed to get out of the pandemic spiked inflation.
Yeah.
That was the problem, right? And by 2024, to get back to your point, people had forgotten that. People had forgotten that.
Yeah.
And so Biden, Harris carry the can for it. So you just got to get them back. And I think it takes us back in terms of misinformation, disinformation, the white noise. And I love that phrase, white noise. It's taken from a novel from about more than 25 years ago, Don DeLillo.
Okay.
I like that idea that you cut through all of that and get down to the fundamentals of what matters to you, what matters on a basis. And when you say that to people, it gives them a space of control that they can examine. So in other words, if you go to people, let's just bring all this conversation together. Jeffrey Epstein, that rumbles. But when it comes to you, is healthcare what matters to you? Is healthcare really what matters to you? Okay. What is your situation with your current? I know we're going to be talking about UK politics. Yeah. But we'll start with the US. What is, actually, I will refer to the UK in a minute. What is your situation in the US? How do you afford to have healthcare? Where is it provided from? Right? Does the government have a place in making sure that you can afford healthcare? What role is it that is needed? What about private healthcare? Do we need more responsibility, more regulation there? You just sit down and think about it from your personal standpoint, where you are in your position. And then if you have questions, then you go and ask others what they think about it, and you build from there, right?
Yeah.
And keep politics out of it. Again, keep the right left stuff out of it. Just
keep the right left
straight up conversation.
Just like that. And one reason why Mandani won in New York is that at a basic level, what he was getting through, and I know it was campaign. It's not that he's in governance. You have to be in governance. But he was telling people, what is, New Yorkers, what is your healthcare situation? What is your transport situation? Right? What is your situation with childcare? And that's why he won. It wasn't because he was a democratic socialist, as much as I can argue both pros and cons on democratic socialism. He won because he got onto those issues that took place. The UK, just because I'm going to give us a teaser for our next podcast. National Health Service, right? Fundamentally, what is the NHS providing for you if you're in the UK? Right? Is that of value to you? Is that of value to your neighbor? Is that of value to community? And if it is, how do you protect that? How do you make sure that you can fund that system? That's where you are in the UK right now. And just talk about that, and don't deviate and talk about it's because of migrants and asylum seekers that the NHS has issues. It's not. Don't deviate nowhere near. Don't deviate and say that the problems with the NHS or the European Court of Human Rights. It's not. Don't deviate with it. Stick to what should be funded there. And if the Labour Party, bless their cotton socks, jackasses, if the Labour Party could get back to that fundamental, instead of the health minister possibly campaigning to be prime minister, and instead of making this deep dive towards the Reform Party, if they could do that, we'd be in a lot better place, because the British news cycle for the past week, and maybe we could wind up with this because it'll take us back to disinformation, has been absolutely corrupted and poisoned by the disinformation pushed by Donald Trump, the Reform Party, led by Donald Trump's former employee, Nigel Farage,
Yep.
a certain right-wing newspaper, and the Reform Party's TV channel, decided with the fact that somehow the BBC has caused a grievous injury to Donald Trump and should no longer exist. All right? Now, your fundamental issue at this point should be, does the BBC provide you with something of value where you are? Does it provide you with news? Does it provide you with information? Does it provide your children with programming? Does it provide other entertainment? Does it provide a world service that projects, that gives you news from overseas and lets people know what Britain is? Does it provide you with all of those? Right? Have a think about that. And then you can cut through the fact that because of one, and I know this because we teach this stuff and we do this stuff here in Dublin, because of one awful edit, a fundamental editing mistake. And I'll tell you how simple this could have been solved. When Donald Trump, when they used two different sentences from Donald Trump's speech on January 6, 2021, all they had to do was put a white flash between the two sentences. And then it's completely legitimate. Because
I was thinking
the sentences are from different.
Yeah, like a white flash or put something like, a few moments later or something along these lines to show that it's not. It was a.
Yeah.
Even I know that. I mean, I'm not even.
Yeah. Exactly. And they screwed it up. Did they screw it up as part of a devious BBC plot to knock Donald Trump out of office? No, they did not. Did they do Donald Trump a grievous injury? No. Guess what? He's the president now. It didn't affect this. The fundamental of this case is that on January 6, 2021, Donald Trump called on his supporters to go to the Capitol and to stop the confirmation of the legally elected president, Joe Biden. Donald Trump did that by saying the 2020 election was rigged, illegitimate, stop the steal. Donald Trump said Mike Pence should stop this, and if Mike Pence isn't going to stop this, what are you going to do about it?
Yep.
We've got to make this happen. What does we've got to make this happen? Right? So the fundamental here is that there was an editing error, but it did not distort what happened on that day. But UK media has been consumed for the past week and hijacked by a campaign which has been going on for months by Donald Trump, the Reform Party, Nigel Farage, and other allies to clear out the BBC. And why did they want to clear out the BBC? Because it gives more space for Donald Trump, the Reform Party, and the Reform Party's national television station and social media platforms to try to dominate news cycle. So,
they can't control, because they can't control it the way they can control social media. I mean, like right now, of course, Musk controls X. Larry Ellison now will be controlling TikTok USA.
Yeah.
So that's what they want. They can't control it, so they hate it.
Yeah. So when Elon Musk calls for civil war in Britain, he did that, by the way, last week.
Oh yeah.
Don't know if anybody noticed. When he calls for civil war in Britain, do you want a national broadcaster that will mention that Elon Musk has called for civil war in Britain? Would you like that? Or would you prefer that there is no national broadcaster to refer to that? When you have a debate on the National Health Service, would you like a national broadcaster to present you information about the National Health Service? Or would you like it to simply be a TV channel allied, in fact, the outlet of a political party whose leader has a program every weeknight on that channel? Do you want to rely on that outlet to tell you about the health service? When that outlet, by the way, from 2023 to 2024 was found culpable by Ofcom on at least 6 occasions in terms of violations of the broadcasting code. Is that what you want? You want to get rid of the BBC and leave it with that? That is the type of fundamental question which gets back to as we talk about misinformation and disinformation, gets back to the issue of responsibility, you know, and can people take the time to call for responsibility from institutions and also be responsible themselves? Can they take the time to do that?
And it's not to be emotional about it. I think, you know, keep emotions out of it. Like, as I like to say, you know, when people, even during Brexit, the term that people were saying, and I hated it when they were saying, you know, people voted with their hearts, not with their minds. I'm like, no, next time vote with your mind. Your heart is not designed for thinking, right? So
I love those rationalizations. No. Excuse me, I'm gonna jump off this cliff, but I'm doing it because my heart tells me to jump off this cliff. Don't be a moron. You stop listening to your heart if you're gonna jump off the damn cliff. And
yes. So yeah,
and if they want to get emotional, come troll me on social media. Vent that way, and then get it out of your system, and then get smart about what's happening.
Yeah, well, that's why we've got this podcast. That's why it's called Retort, right? Like I try to rant on behalf of people, although I'm, well, my wife complains that sometimes I'm a bit too much, and I think that I'm not much enough. And I think I need to do more ranting, but you know, I'm trying to get a balance in here. You know, it's like I suppose, you know, I'm somewhat too British. Or maybe I'm not British enough for the British.
Don't let it drop.
Too polite.
I told you. I tell you what, man, I'm from Alabama. My dad's a preacher. That's an absolutely potent combination for going hellfire on people and so on. But anyway, let's hope we got better days coming up this week. I guess I'll close with this. I'll close with this. My wife, shout out to the UK. My wonderful wife from Macclesfield. Hello, everybody up in Macclesfield. You know, she said today, in fact, just a couple hours ago, she said to me, "Are you feeling a bit hopeful?" And I said, "Well, you know, I'm always cautious about just simply hopeful, but I'm actually feeling like, that we could be getting into a better place now, and we could be getting into a better place because, as terrible as things are, I think people are sensing in the U.S. that, you know, they don't want this type of dysfunction and so on." And so I think that my problem in the UK is, I don't think people are at that point. I don't think people in the UK are at the point where they feel it's so dysfunctional, they're going to pull it back. When you got a Labour Party today whose decision it was simply to just bail out on the economic issue that they've got, because they won't deal with the fact they've got the budget hole from Brexit. And then when they decided, all right, we're just going to punish, you know, asylum seekers and migrants again, you know, it's like, you know, we'll go with whatever the Denmark system is, given and not realizing that the UK is not Denmark.
Yeah.
You know,
as far as I'm concerned, they basically officially, I mean, not officially, but in my view, effectively they're saying that asylum seekers are illegal migrants, which is, I'm like, it's a disgrace.
Read your international law. Read the UN Convention from the 1950s, Home Secretary and Prime Minister. So we'll just, so get back, cut through this and so on. And because ask yourself, why does the Reform Party and some conservatives want to get rid of the European Court of Human Rights? They want to get rid of the European Court of Human Rights so that the UK is not accountable to international law. Yep. That's why they want to get rid of it. And Labour has played into their hands with this idea of getting more tough on an asylum seeker system by effectively criminalizing asylum seekers, which you're not allowed to do. Yeah. So stay woke, folks. You know,
and we're not talking about that kind of woke, as in stay awake, woke up here.
Stay awake, man. Not the perverted form of woke, right? Yeah, I know Tim's got to correct me on this. I'm still that's gonna be on my gravestone. And Tim's gonna say what he means is, you know, stay aware, not the fact that he thinks the original
woke
version. Yeah, the original woke, the proper woke, not the woke as it is represented by every whack job associated with Donald Trump or with Graham Linehan. Bless his cotton socks. Anyway, another story for another time.
But thank you, Scott, as always. I mean, that was very informative. And again, everybody, all the links for Scott is on our website and description below as always. And yeah, I think we're going to have quite a few episodes. So I'll see you very soon.
Stay safe, stay sane, be decent to each other, everybody. All right.
Here. Well, my friends, this is it. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Thanks so much for joining us. Now, before I go away, if you are on YouTube, please make sure that you hit the subscribe button below. It really makes a massive difference for the growth of our channel. And if you're following us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you need to give us a star review. Apparently, your following means nothing unless you give us a star review. Don't ask me why, but give us whatever star review that you think is fair. And if you're not following us, what are you doing? Come on, man. It doesn't cost you anything. It really makes a big difference. I really, really appreciate your support. But also, if you've got cash to spare, consider to become a founding member. We are an independent medium. We're not reliant on any kind of company that gets money from Russian oligarchs or any kind of weird sponsorships or anything like that. All of the companies that work with us are genuine companies that I know and I like. But ultimately, it's the members, you guys, our subscribers, our followers, our founding members, or those of you who actually just donated us like $1 here, a couple of bucks there, $5 there. All of that makes a big difference. This is what makes us truly independent. We're not chasing clickbait because we don't want clickbait. We want facts. We want the truth. We want something that we can all aspire to and something that truly make us at least work harder to make the world a better place. Not just talk about it, but actually make it happen. And of course, it supports all of our campaigns as well. So my friends, thank you so much. Much love. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.